Mentality equals ability. The rest is time and effort. Last Saturday, lots of memories coming back because I was running a meeting for the leaders, and I was just talking about, hey, no matter how many years go by, old school entrepreneurs and old school business owners and people that are trying to build stuff and create stuff and build something, they think differently than employees. The reason why this is in my mind is because I've been having to teach, and maybe this is something that you can go back to. I'll start with that. Welcome back to Unlocked. Thanks for listening. So if you don't mind sharing this with a coworker, maybe a franchisee owner, maybe somebody you think that could hear it, or maybe your parents if they don't understand what you're doing. A lot of times people just need to share other sources, right? You know, our parents still think that working a 9-to-5 job is the only way to make money and pay the bills, while there's YouTubers making millions and millions of dollars on just creating views online, right? So if you can share this, it helps us grow. Thank you so much. Mentality equals ability. The rest is time and effort. People that build stuff, entrepreneurs, no matter if it was in 1980, in 1975, in 1940, and I was not around for those times, but I can guarantee that people that are like that, they think differently than employees. So there's usually three things that I want to talk about, three and only three that you got to focus on. And what's interesting about these three things is that they apply to anything. They apply to what we do in direct sales. They apply to sports. They apply to relationships. They apply to the neighborhood you want to live in. They apply to everything. So the first thing is work ethic. Work ethic. And just let's just pause there for a minute. Who is in 100% control of work ethic? You are. You decide every day. You wake up, no matter what circumstances you have, and you decide what your work ethic is going to be every single day, no matter what's going on. You could feel like you have a justification or a reason to stay home or something that makes you sad to maybe not use your work ethic to the highest potential, but you are in control of it every single day. Things like work ethic is, people that are employees, they're always thinking about their break. When they're at work, like if there's 5 minutes left to a break, an employee, they will take all 5 minutes. All 5 minutes. Entrepreneurs, business owners, business people that are trying to grow and build something and create stuff and break a generational thing. They eat lunch at 5 p.m. for like survival purposes. They're like, it's not pretty watching an entrepreneur eat. It's almost like they're just like wolfing down this food, and then they're like, all right, we're back. What's next? They do things differently. It's not so pretty. The goal of an entrepreneur is to not look at the clock. An employee, they're looking at the clock all day. They're clock watching. Your goal is to not have to be looking at the clock. When you're an employee, the clock, it looks like it's almost going backwards. You ever look at it like you're at a job, you ever on your shift and whatever, and like time is just going so slow. And that is because that's mentality. Mentality is an ability. Entrepreneurs, they don't have time. There's not enough time in the day. You almost don't like holidays anymore so much because you have to close down your doors. Now Christmas is on a Wednesday. It destroys your momentum of the week. You don't get sick. It's amazing. It's amazing. Entrepreneurs, like I don't get sick again. If I get sick, it lasts less than 2 hours because I don't have enough time. Sick days, paid time off. People that are employees, they get sick all the time. And there's no sick days as an entrepreneur because you got to open the doors. You got to do the deal. And I think we're losing, like when you're having to explain so much of like the little details of like break time to your employees, even if they are employees, you want them to think better. You want them to think in a way that can make them more money in the future. And I think it's a big deal. Mentality equals ability. It's a skill you have to develop. It's amazing how fast time goes for an entrepreneur, how slow it goes for an employee. You don't want to go home so much for the holidays because you got to close down your business. Your business is everything now to you, and it means everything, and it can feed generations to come. If you think about, like, there's not enough time in the day. People that are employees, they always say things like, I don't have time. I don't have time for this. I don't know if I'm going to make it. They always say that kind of stuff. And people say, I don't have time very freely, but they don't know how many Sundays they got left. You don't even know how many hours there is in a month. You don't even know how many hours there's in a week. And look, if there's think about it, if you do just math, right? If there's 168 hours in a week, and let's say you work 68 of those hours, which is a lot of hours. Like, that's a lot of hours. Everybody would agree that's a lot of hours for a full-time job. And then you sleep 7 hours a day, so that's 49. That's 50 hours. You sleep 50 hours a week and you work 68 hours. You still have 50 hours left to join a bowling league, to do your hobbies, to go record with Philly on your camera, to go surfing, do your groceries, shower. You got a full-time job to go date somebody, to create something. For some reason, we created like a full-time job. The word full means it occupies every part of time. It actually represents less than 25% of time available. If it's 168 hours in a week, 24 hours, 7 days a week, and you work 40, then you're working around 23% of the available time. How can that be full? Richard, why do you think like this? Who taught you that? Well, I was in an environment. I didn't think like this. I thought like an employee because I was raised in a school. My teachers were employees. But I got around other people that thought differently. I got around my mentor that was retiring her parents in her mid-30s, that was retiring her husband in her mid-30s, that was buying homes in cash and vehicles in cash. And I was like, hey, that was not a flashy person. It was not a celebrity. And I was like, what is this? And she said, Richard, mentality is an ability, and the rest is time and effort. Work ethic. People look at it differently. When they're entrepreneurs, they're trying to build something. The way you get it is you get around those people for a long enough period of time. The second thing is attitude. Attitude, and let's back up. An attitude. Who's in 100%? We're talking about work ethic. Who's in 100% of control of work ethic? You are. When it comes to your attitude, who's 100% in control of your attitude? You are again. You decide your attitude every single day. And look, 90% of life is attitude. 90% of life is attitude. 10% of it is skill. And you've heard that in multiple times. It's true. 90% of the stuff that happens to you, it's more important how you react than the actual thing that happens to you. Because you've never seen a good movie. You've never seen a good story unless the person had challenges, circumstances that were putting you against, between a rock and a hard place. It's the person that has an attitude that thinks differently. You've all heard, or if you haven't, this is a funny one. The story of the two kids. So there's two kids wake up on Christmas, and Christmas Day, and one child, really negative, comes downstairs, and there's, instead of like Christmas gifts and stuff, there's like a pile of manure, horse manure. There's just a big pile of crap, okay? And it stinks and it's smelly. And the kid's like, what is this? This sucks. I hate Christmas. What is this pile of crap here? They use a different word. And so he leaves and he hates it. Second kid comes down the stairs, positive, optimistic kid. There's this big, giant pile of crap, manure. And he's like, what is all this manure here? There must be a pony somewhere. And again, he just looks at the negative as an opportunity that there's something positive. Everything in life, 90% of life, is attitude. What's your attitude about going to work? Is it work? Or is it, whatever? Like, is it actually work? Like, I'm waking up, and for the longest time, it's a pleasure because I've been waking up on Sundays. I've been waking up on Mondays every week for the last 8 years. I am pumped for Mondays. It's my favorite day of the week. I'm super excited for Mondays to come. I'm not so excited for Fridays. I don't have that mindset. It's because I'm excited for another week to tackle and to start into another chance. And so that's mindset. Taxes. Like, most people are waiting for their tax return. And I remember the first time I was in a room where somebody said like, hey, I paid $50,000 back in taxes. I was like, that's crazy. That sucks. I'm waiting for my tax return. I'm so excited. They're like, Richard, you're wrong. You're just in the wrong tax bracket. And I was like, what? Why do I want to pay more money back? That doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, Richard, if you have to pay a lot of money back in taxes, what does that mean? Well, it means that you made a lot of money. I'm like, wow. Like, well, who thinks like that? Who teaches that? That's attitude. That's mentality. Mentality equals ability. And I remember my first year that I ran a business, and I made some money. I think I had to pay back $10,000 back in taxes, and I didn't like it. And I was like, I remember calling my mentor. I'm like, hey, there must be something wrong. There's a box I didn't check. on the paperwork. There's got to be like something I forgot, like a check mark or something. You know, I got $30,000 or $40,000 left in the bank and I have to pay $10,000 in taxes. I was like, there's something wrong. My mentor's like, there's nothing wrong. You just got to pay $10,000. It's just taxes. No one escapes taxes. You got to pay the taxes. And I was like, well, this sucks. They're like, Richard, you want to be, next year you want to pay $20,000 in taxes. And I'm like, that just means you just made double the money. And I was like, I see it. I understand it. But it sucks. Like, and I was like, man, like I knew it was a good thing, but I couldn't, my brain was still default employee because I spent so many years in school, so many years around teachers that were employees, around my parents, around people that are excited for tax returns. So even though I knew the truth was different, I was still like, come on, how do I got to pay? I want to pay more money in taxes. It's an attitude. It's a mentality. Who thinks like that? You got to be around those people. You know, you're not going to go from thinking like an employee by listening to this and all of a sudden you think like an entrepreneur. You have to be around the environment. You have to immerse yourself in the environment. It's the same as, look, if I have a water and I put it at 30 degrees, 30 degrees is below freezing temperature, so the water is going to freeze. And now I have an ice cube, okay? If I take this ice cube and I put it back and I put it in negative 30 degrees, it's a 60-degree delta. It's a 60-degree difference. It's still frozen, though. It's the state does not change, but there's a big difference in temperature, agree? That's a lot of how you got to think of your brain and how you're going to change, is that you might be in the same state. You know, you might think the same things, but the temperature is different. The environment is different. And over time, you know, this ice cube is going to be a lot harder to bring back to water because it has to go 62 degrees versus the one that's at 30. It's almost a couple degrees away from going back to liquid state. Mentality equals ability. You can't just think like that. You have to be and submerge yourself in that environment for very, very long time, almost longer than, which is why we encourage to work more hours, which is why we're against 9 to 5. We're against it for ourselves, not for others, which is why we think a little bit different and careful because there's no way back. The third thing is your pitch. And what I mean your pitch, I don't mean your sales pitch of whatever you or your company sells. I'm talking about what do you guys sell? I'm talking about your way to package and present things, your way to like put lipstick on something, like your way to get in and out of conversations, to soften up the bodyguard, to make a 30-second friendship with somebody. Hey, how you doing? Hey, this is me. This is whatever. You know, I remember back when we first started, we had a bunch of inventory and our products would break and stuff like that. And I was, you know, and one of my favorite things to do was to give somebody like a broken set of like pillowcases or whatever, like a broken item. And I would be like, you know, who can bring me $20 left for this? And it would just teach people how to like just grab something that's not in the best state and make it better. And you got to learn how to package and present the business, how to package and present the opportunity, how to relate, how to ask enough questions, how to stay open-minded, you know, and it's mentality equals ability. The rest is time and effort. And I think that, and I'll bring it back home when you're, as we wrap this up, if you're spending a lot of time teaching little details, how to take a break, why it's important to do PM atmosphere, why it's important to come back, why it's important to prepare on Sundays for Monday, why it's important to do all these things that really entrepreneurs consider normal, is because you're teaching tactical stuff. You're not teaching people to think. You are not creating an environment in which people can immerse and now behave and think like an entrepreneur. You're probably not giving enough shout outs to that. You're probably recognizing people only that sell a bunch and make you money instead of recognizing people that have those behaviors. Shout out to so-and-so that despite I've hit the goal, despite I've made $4,000 on her paycheck last week, she still stayed later because she wanted to help somebody else. That's an entrepreneur. Clap it up for that person. I have to find behaviors that highlight, that bring to light what I want to create so I can have an environment in which people can immerse in and build their mentality. Think different, because that ability makes, like, people understand this. If you're in a sales career, you make more money than doctors, you make more money than lawyers, you make more money than all of them without an education. And it's because your mentality equals ability. The rest is time and effort. Hopefully this helps, and we'll see you at the next one, guys.